Here's an interesting, at least I hope it's an interesting kind of perspective. I'm sure people have seen the numbers. Chime has 8 million customers and Varo 2-3 million. And, it's incredibly impressive to think about that, the growth that these challenger bank neobanks have had. But it's not all perfect in their world. They've got some challenges. The challenger banks have challenges. One of their challenges is demographics. They tend to attract a lower middle income consumer that is just typically hard to make profitable. It's you've got to have a mix. It's great you can serve those customers, but the way most banks make money off of low middle income consumers is through overdraft. Yep. And that's just not a good strategy for the long term. So that's one challenge they have. Another challenge that the challenger banks have is that they need to expand their revenue models. They come to market, say, oh, we have no fees, we have no this, no that. Well, it's great, but how are they making money just through interchange? It's a limitation, especially when they have to, share that with a bank as a service provider. And number three, the VCs love to talk about how the challenger banks have such a low cost of acquisition, CAC. Nonsense, absolutely nonsense. Chime spent $40 to $50 million last year on TV advertising. Varo's up there. Aspiration is spending money on TV advertising. They've got an increasing cost of customer acquisition. Now, let's take this view of, three challenges that the challenger banks have. Customer demographics. The third one was the customer acquisition, and the second being the revenue. Let's take it from the perspective of a typical community-based financial institution, typical community bank or credit union. What are their challenges, James Robert? Well, number one, demographics. Their customers are too old. Number two, revenue. Interest income is getting challenged. They need to find new ways of getting, non-interest income. Number three, their cost of customer acquisition is increasing. Same challenges on both sides of the coin. But now, who's going to win this battle? Would you rather, have young consumers who are low to middle income consumers and go from there? Or would you rather have old consumers and try to go? Well, I think I'd rather start with the younger consumers and build from there. Number two, you've got new revenue. You've got revenue opportunities. Well, where would you rather start from? A team that has absolutely zero experience with new product development and deployment, or a team that is basically all about new product development and deployment? Yep. And number three, your cost of acquisition. I'd rather start with the challenger banks whose mindset and capabilities are all about digital marketing. I mean, these guys, you look at what they're doing, their search marketing capabilities are strong. Their site design is actually optimized for digital growth. Number three, they are, you look at what like a Monzo or in particular is doing, they build online communities.
Yes.
They're just so much further ahead. And why? To get back to your point, mindset. They started from a digital mindset. They are, we talk a lot about consumers being digital natives, but the challenger banks are digital natives from a banking perspective. And I think that gives them a big advantage over the incumbents who may be sitting there with a lot of customers and members. But looking forward,
all I can think of is, as you're talking through this, comparing the challengers of the neos to the incumbents, is like an Amazon, Jeff Bezos, who started in the digital space, to where Walmart went out and acquired Jet.com and tried to bring Jet into the old legacy business model. So Walmart was trying to become digital, but it was bringing the digital model into the legacy model. And that's created a lot of friction internally, from an operational standpoint, even. Hearing you talk through this too, the idea of niche, of focusing around key market segments. And you mentioned some of the challenges for the challengers being demographics, but I just had on the podcast Ben Shoppett with Unify Money, and he's going after more of a high income market. And he knows that there are challenges with that high income market that he's addressing, even the idea of digital communities. And so there's tremendous amounts of opportunities here. Can a traditional incumbent financial brand capture some of this thinking, capture even some of this capability, or even the mindset and bring it in internally? Is there an opportunity for that?
Yes, because it's not all about cultural change and mindset change. It's about strategic clarity,
Yes,
and alignment. And, what I often tell financial institutions to do is I tell them to take what I like to call the USAA approach. Now, I actually don't think USAA thinks of it this way, but it's at least a good example. We're used to doing customer segmentation. And when you see segmentation, they often are displayed like in terms of quadrants or, 9 square, boxes kinds of things. Throw that out. Segmentation is the visual model is a bullseye. And at the center of USAA's bullseye are active deployed military members. And they basically design everything about their business around serving the needs of the active deployed military member. Now, reality is that only makes up, I don't know what percentage of their total membership base, but it's not even a majority. But here's the reality, is if they can serve the active deployed military member, then they're probably doing a pretty good job of serving the active non-deployed military member, which is the next ring outside of the bullseye. And if they can serve those people pretty well, they're probably serving the non-active, non-deployed military members in the ring out of that. And if they can serve those people pretty well, they're probably serving the affiliated family members in the ring outside of that. And so reality is from a strategic perspective, you've got to answer the question, who's in our bullseye? And can we have more than one bullseye? But reality is that you focus on the customers or members who are in your bullseye and build around them. And then the likely thing that's going to happen is that even though you are focusing on a segment that is not that huge, you're going to get members or customers who are in the outer rings of that bullseye because you're doing such a great job of serving those in the bullseye. And let me make the last point before you jump in, because I can see you chomping at the bit. When you look at the challenger banks that are out there, you get you see the big numbers for the Chime and the Varos and so forth. But if you look at the whole space, who's out there are companies that like Joust that focus on gig workers. That's who's in their bullseye. Companies like 10th, which is now being renamed Boulevard, Donald Hawkins out of Kansas City, focusing on African-American consumers. And it's not just every African-American consumer, it's those that fit a particular profile of need. That's who's in his bullseye. You got challenger banks coming to market focusing on disabled consumers. There's one that it was just renamed. It was called B-Money. I don't know what they changed their name to. They're focusing on LGBT consumers. And so this niche that you talked about is spot on, but you can't just pay lip service to it. There has to be unique needs. We've seen for 15 years now, the Bank for Women. Pink doesn't do it, my friend. It's not what women, and in fact, many women don't have unique needs. My wife manages the finances in this household, and she says, I couldn't care less about a bank for women. I'm managing a family. But there are segments in the female population that do have unique needs, and you got to find those. So define who's in the bullseye, but that's how you make the transition, James Robert. It's about redefining the strategic focus on particular segments that you have been successful in serving. And this is why a lot of the strategic planning processes that these banks and credit unions go through drive me nuts. It's because it's all like this greenfield thing of what are we going to do in the next 5 years, without a look back and saying, well, what made us successful in the past 5 to 10 years? Who are we attracting? And is that really who's by default in our bullseye?